afraid of dying. I'm afraid I haven't been alive enough. It should be written on every schoolroom blackboard. Life is a playground. Or nothing.
Mr. Nobody is a story of a man who wakes up in 2092, where humanity has cured death, and he seems to be the only moral remaining. He's not afraid of dying, and he shares a strong message about the meaning of life and the role education plays in enabling purpose. This short movie aims to assess the future of education in the context of technological unemployment. Some scholars, such as McPhee, argue there is no need for policies for a jobless economy yet, for the simple reason that the era of mass technological unemployment is not imminent. While it is true, more pressing concerns might currently exist. Let us entertain the thought of a jobless society, and precisely, education's role in that society. For the sake of clarity, we will make certain assumptions about this futurist society. We are not situating ourselves in a specific point in time, though it is the period where technological advancements have driven marginal cost to nearly zero. Scarcity of resources is no longer a prevailing issue, and the average person will not need to work for economic reward. The state will provide UBI, or the medium for exchanging goods and services will be completely different. Money is no longer the norm. Either way, we do not imagine the society undergoing a social collapse or mass disruption. It will be rather nice and low stress. The future looks utopian, not dystopian. Soon, we will solve humanity's economic problem, and when we do, everything we currently know about society's functioning structure will change. One part of our lives that will change drastically is education. For education is the heart of our society. To ensure its viability, the education system is inevitably going to change. The system encourages a simple objective perspective on the meaning of life. Getting a degree to prove you can work is why you go to school. But to strive in a techno-unemployment society, education must shift towards an aim achievement or fitting fulfillment philosophy. To understand how education will adapt, we first look at what type of occupations citizens will hold. Next, according to these findings, we will propose adequate structural changes schools will need to apply, and thus changing their culture and their purpose. Throughout human history, technological and social forces have brought huge transformations in how jobs look, how they get done, and who does them. Interestingly enough, by looking into the evolution of jobs, it is evident that with the advancements in society comes new occupations and roles. For example, in the 1800s, the common occupations in cities were artisans, shoemakers, blacksmiths, clerks, etc., all very specialized roles. But as civilization ticked on, the Industrial Revolution brought mass production, new factories, new kinds of workers, and humans adapted once again with the rapidly changing world. Then came the development of World Wide Web and computers, which propelled us to a knowledge-based economy. As the numbers of workers needed and the hours worked have been falling, humans are once again enhancing their labor productivity, and this time due to technological change. As it is shown on the graph from VoxU, the average annual market hours worked per capita in 25 countries has been decreasing ever since the 19th century. Needless to say, working at a job, career, or vocation has always been a critical part of our lives. But this raises the question of how much will people work in the future with the imminent rise of artificial intelligence and automation? Because inherently we're conditioned to work. Mass automation and advancements in artificial intelligence will undoubtedly change the landscape of what constitutes work in the future, as machines outperform humans in every field of the economy and marginal costs essentially become zero. Thus, education's main objective of creating efficient workers for the labor force will be completely redefined and move away from the discourse of skills and towards the discourse of meaning and motivation. However, contrary to what a jobless society sounds like, it does not simply mean a playground where everyone is diverting themselves with all kinds of leisure activities all day long. Instead, as suggested by Sidorkin in Education for Jobless Society, by paying attention to the small and early manifestations of the unprecedented, we're able to formulate a vague image of the future of education and jobs. With that being said, in a nearly jobless society, citizens will still have the choice of different types of occupations in life, and the three categories projected are presumption, volunteerism, and self-design. To start, prosumers are people that not only consume, but also produce. With the advent of Web 2.0, prosumers have significantly grown in participation because of social media such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc. In a prosumer society, the first type of prosumers are called the intentional prosumers. These citizens are motivated to create content for free since they inherently love sharing with others. The second type of prosumer, the unintentional prosumer, have no intention of creating value, in contrast to the intentional. However, they still unintentionally produce value for others simply by consuming. For instance, by using Google, its algorithms start to learn more just because we use it. The third type of prosumer, the personal prosumer, a type of self-servicing work that creates value for oneself. For example, exchanging their own services for a discount, like the DIY culture, do it yourself. Next, volunteerism. The involvement of citizens in volunteer labor is already popular in many places around the world. In America, for example, in 2013, around 62.8 million people volunteered for an organization and spent on average 50 hours doing so. The contribution of volunteering is also quite significant to the economy, with around $173 billion in contribution, which equals to roughly 1% of the United States GDP. However, this brings on the following question. Volunteering sounds great, but why assume that people will volunteer? To answer this question, it is important to understand that the jobless society will be composed of a few people with good jobs and the rest volunteering. It will definitely not be a society filled with leisure. Hence, the state will be intensively involved to push people to participate more in volunteer labor, and citizens will therefore be under heavy moral pressure. Third, there cannot be traditional art anymore, in the sense of producing things of beauty. Indeed, everyone is subjected to an aesthetic evaluation. Thus, we take responsibility for our appearances in the world. In the jobless society, people will focus on their self-image. And there are three different ways people can achieve this. One, the curator. I am what I repost. Number two, the content creator. Close to a traditional author, but constrained to self-design issues. And three, the adventurer, the reporter. They serve as a means for others to increase the level of eventfulness in their lives. This dream of aestheticization of human life has been long fed throughout history. John Adams' letter to Abigail says it beautifully. I must study politics and war so that my sons may have the liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, national history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce and agriculture, in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, tapestry, and porcelain. We are the children of Adam's sons, and society's next step is to venerate the arts and self-design. To us, techno-unemployment simply means technology and artificial intelligence will revolutionize how we interact and go about spending our time. Polanyi's paradox is no longer paradoxical. Machines can learn without human intervention. This is a stepping stone for mankind. Rather than spending a majority of our lives working for economic reward, we will find meaning through presumption, volunteerism, and self-design. Now that we have established what the jobless society will look like, we can finally assess the educational system which will be found underneath this society. Now the question arises, how will education and its purpose change? In a society with fewer jobs, will everyone require an education? Does everyone need to have a formal education? Mark Tucker, president of the National Center on Education and the Economy, presents an interesting theory regarding the role of education in a future society. He assumes that there would be fewer jobs and therefore a need for a universal basic income. The main idea he presents is that an educational system in the future will be found in a sorting mechanism. The first bin sorted into will be reserved for the few masters of the universe. This refers to those students who are tested to be more skilled or gifted than the others. As jobs become more and more scarce, only a selection of students will actually be able to create the future and amass enough money to make sure that it is their children who succeed them and not the children of others. The second bin is for the others. These are those who don't need all of the wonderful skills that the masters of the universe possess, because they don't need to earn a living and will not have an opportunity to gain the dignity that comes with paid work. They will rely on the government for basic incomes so that they can live. To further explore this idea of sorting, we need to look at the mechanism of deciding where to put each student. Tucker states that perhaps sorting could be done based on merit. Ideally, this should work as hard work will pay off for those who are highly intelligent, but realistically, this seems to be unlikely. There could be several negative implications because of the overwhelming advantages enjoyed by the masters. We can expect that their children will automatically be assigned to an education designed to prepare them for the jobs their parents have. The others, found in the second bin, will not have access to the best education. Hence, it will be rare that a person is recognized for their merit. This nepotism could cause severe inefficiencies in society. Another scenario could be that education will shift towards the creative arts. Maybe the creative arts will bloom because job recruiting may be only for highly technical positions. Therefore, education for the second bin people could be focused on stimulating and fostering creativity. This is somewhat shocking, because at many points in history, art used to be reserved as a leisure activity for the elites. However, this theory introduces us to a scenario where now art becomes a part of those who are economically and socially underprivileged. Let's analyze now how the purpose of education will change by comparing the purpose of education today to the purpose of education in the future. We can argue that the purpose of mandatory education seen in society today is not only job-oriented, but also aims to help citizens become more independent. What we mean by this is that individuals need basic language and basic mathematical skills to live in a society. Being illiterate, for example, is a huge handicap. Also, we believe that mandatory education leads to better societies as individuals learn how to communicate with one another in school and learn basic ethics, which can be fundamental to establishing and exploring the idea of the meaning of one's life. Now, we can also argue that the purpose of supplemental education, such as college today, is usually job-oriented. People will go to university or college to acquire sufficient knowledge in order to become a professional and then get a job, proceed to live a life in a certain career. There are exceptions, however, of people pursuing their passions in college, and most of the time people pursue their passions at the expense of a financially secure future. In a techno-unemployment era, we believe that both the first bin and the second bin would be imposed through a sort of mandatory education, because the purpose of a mandatory education goes beyond the scope of getting a job. This will not change. Everybody needs to be able to communicate, to read, to have basic mathematical knowledge. Furthermore, mandatory exposure to different fields of studies may lead to self-discovery or the discovery of latent passions. Now, looking at the purpose of supplemental education in the future, this differs from the first bin to the second bin. In the first bin, the purpose is very utilitarian. The purpose is to learn masterful education, to fill the very few jobs that we have in society. And looking at the second bin, the purpose is more hedonistic. After common education, there is no need to continue learning. People are free to pursue their passions. If one's individual passion lies in arts or philosophy, then they could study it if they want. We argue that education will shift towards the creative arts. Maybe the creative arts will bloom because job recruiting may only be for the highly technical positions, as stated previously. Therefore, education in the second bin will find people focused more on stimulating and establishing and practicing creativity. Of course, this is a fundamental change to the societal norm that we are used to, whereby the creative arts are reserved for the elites. However, engaging in the arts through literature, through writing, through stimulating creative expression can, for many individuals in this futuristic society, enhance their sensibilities and better refine their imagination. This will create a more creative and imaginative outlook on the world, which can bring value to individuals, for they'll have a better ability to find meaning in their own life, or better yet, tackle the existential question of what is the meaning of life itself. Putting this all together, humankind has evolved over time into a working kind species, built on a foundation of skills and knowledge-based education. But how will this change as technology continues to evolve and essentially forces us into a jobless society? One way we can look at it is by analyzing education. Education's objectives will certainly divert from creating a foundation of skills-based work, transforming into potentially a discourse of meaning and motivation. Fast forward to the future, assuming that as a species we are still here, where has education gone? Is it a sorting mechanism between the masters of the universe and others? Or will the focus shift towards the creative arts, helping to stimulate children's creative output, allowing them to analyze and question the meaning attributed to their own lives? We believe that there will be a divide between mandatory and supplemental education. The former, focusing on providing society with a foundation of cognitive ability required to properly explore life's meaning, and the latter, built around stimulating each other's creativity and imagination through the arts. Together, humans will have the ability to seek meaning in their lives, which will inherently help humans find happiness. Now, the question lies with you. Do you think society and education will adapt with the changing times to find our interpersonal life's meaning? Or does the future look more bleak and pessimistic, where we falter into a jobless world with no meaning at all?